Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another hour of Healthy Conclusions, where we try to give our listeners important information on nutrition, exercise, and holistic alternative and integrative medicine. Please take a minute to visit our website at www.healthyconclusions.com and like us on Facebook. My name is Bob Neugebauer, and I will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight's show is being brought to you by Altrua Health Share, which has been serving its members and their families with their health care needs since 1997. Please take a moment to visit their website at altruahealthshare.org or call 888-244-3839 to see just what Altrua Health Share has to offer for your family's health care needs. It could mean substantial savings. Tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. We have two special guests, Senator Russ Fulcher, who is running for the 1st Congressional District from Meridian, and a distinguished guest, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt from the Karlfeldt Clinic, who is a naturopath, a traditional naturopath, and has a very successful integrative medical clinic practice. Our subject for this evening is going to be a very hot topic. It's the opioid crisis, which has been talked about in the news many times over the last week. So we're going to discuss that and see where we go. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Good evening. Great being on, Bob.
It's nice to have you both here today. I'd like to start off this discussion by asking each of you to give our audience your impression of the opioid crisis and what you think should be done about it. And we'll start off with Russ Fulcher.
Well, first of all, the opioid situation is coming to a head pretty quickly. I think you probably saw a recent press release that the president did that was bringing some focus on this whole situation, and a tremendous amount of fallout as a result of overuse of opiate medication. And I think for one thing, Bob, it's popular. It's been used for acute pain, and it's got some immediate relief characteristics, and so there's a natural desire to use anything that can provide relief for pain. It's also extremely profitable. It's the pharmaceutical companies make a tremendous amount of money off of this, and so the problem, I think, is it's transitioned from a solution for acute pain into a solution for more of a chronic pain, and that's where the addictiveness comes in what ultimately we're all dealing with right now.
Dr. Karlfeldt, how do you feel about this?
I definitely agree with that, Senator Fulcher. This has been an issue that's been around for quite some time. I mean, we've been dealing with pain for a long time, and the opioid crisis, I think it's stemming from early 90s, but it's just coming to a head where we're finally recognizing the severe impact that it has on people's lives. It's taking more lives than you have the Vietnam War, and it's a tremendous amount of lives that are lost. So I'm happy that finally we're taking a look at it. And the issue, I think, is that we're so good at prescribing it, but we're very poor in managing it and also taking people off of it. It's a very quick fix to give it to somebody, but it's a very long and arduous process to take them off an opioid. And I think that is one of the biggest issues, that we don't have that focus in the medical healthcare system currently.
The opioid crisis didn't just happen overnight. It's been lurking in the background for some time. Why is it that it takes so long to recognize a problem like this and see the dangers? Is it because the corporations like the drug companies who lobby Congress, or is it the doctors who prescribe opioids as if they were candy because it seems to be the simplest thing to do? Russ, would you start off on this one?
I think that we've touched on that just a little bit, but again, there's some popularity with that because it does have immediate pain relief characteristics, and so of course a physician is going to want to help his patients and do whatever he can to try to relieve their symptoms, and it's a relatively simple, quick fix, if you will, for that immediate pain. But as Dr. Carlfeld pointed out, there's long-term ramifications for that. And if you're in an automobile accident and you've got a crushed leg or some burned skin, you don't want to. You want immediate relief for that. And then once that starts, if you're not very, very careful, then there can be a whole addiction to it. So I think that we've known for some time that it's lingering out there, but until people start dying and that there's real negative ramifications and the abuse gets to a very high level, it just doesn't get the exposure. And a lot of people who are in decision-making roles don't understand what's really going on until there's a negative blowback.
Dr. Carlfeld, I know what Russ is saying here, but do you feel that the corporations and the drug companies basically lobby Congress and the doctors are responsible for this crisis that we have because of the way they've dealt with basically giving these drugs out like they were candy?
Yes, I think the responsibility lies on both parties. It's hard to point in both, just in one direction. Obviously, the drug companies, you have to recognize that they are a business. They're there to make money. They're responsible to their shareholders. And as citizens and patients, you would want to think that they are there always for your best interest. And as a business, you would want to, obviously you want to supply something that benefits your customer. But also, you want to make sure that you drive your own business, and that's where all the lobbying comes in. And so I think the drug companies play a huge role with the amount of money that they've been able to put in to market their products, and especially then if you deal with a product that is so addictive as opioids. We would let other illegal drug companies to have this kind of a reign, it would just completely blow over, and we would see the kind of impact that we're seeing now with all the amount of deaths and people being addicted.
Well, we keep complaining about the drugs that come across our border. In the last 16 years, we've lost 183,000 people to opioid overdoses, and last year, 64,000 U.S. citizens died because of opioid overdoses. So that number is expected to be exceeded this year. What do you think the answer is to the problem, and why don't you take this one and see where we go, Dr. Carlfeld? Because I think you have to look at this from the perspective, is the doctor become the drug dealer? Is he the new modern-day drug dealer?
And in a way, it looks like he is becoming the legal drug dealer because he has to follow certain medical protocols. And he's also put in a position where he does not have the amount of time to be able to deal with the patient in front of him. So he has a pressure of prescribing something very quickly, and a lot of times that is just giving them something to mask that problem instead of trying to really investigate and see what's going on underneath. I have a couple of prime examples in regards to the impact of opioids. And it's something that hits very close to home. Last week, I had a couple of patients that were relative to older patients of mine. One that had been dealing with severe pain, so she was looked upon as a drug seeker, and so they were just giving her pain medications, but then just complaining that she was a drug seeker. And her husband came in last week letting me know, I hadn't seen this patient for many, many years, that his wife, they finally found out that she'd been dealing with cancer all these years. And the pain that she was suffering from was due to cancer. So there hadn't been anyone that had taken the time to investigate to see where the pain was coming from. Instead, they were just putting a Band-Aid on it. And that it's becoming the doctor's first response is band-aid therapy. How can we just manage the symptoms instead of looking further than that? Then another example I had was a patient of mine that she's the sweetest disposition, most lovely lady. Her sister came in last week, and she's had surgery. This other patient of mine, her sister, and she was given then an opioid to deal with the pain. She was not able to get off of it, and it pushed her in a direction where she actually, because of being an opioid, not knowing what to do with it, she ended up in a position where she committed suicide.
Oh,
so there's two, just to make this personal and how close to home this crisis really is. And that was just last week.
Doc, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share, with your host Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Senator Russ Fulcher and Dr. Michael Karfeld, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org. Okay, we're talking about the personal situations that Dr. Karfeld had dealt with two of his patients. And I'd like to get you to answer some of that too, Russ, but I'd also like you to attach to that. We see a lot of older people who are on these opioids because they have a lot of pain. How do you deal with that from a legislative perspective for the Medicare and Medicaid patients where, they're not paying for the pills? This is almost like a freebie drug dispensary in many cases.
I think that's where legislative policy comes in. And I am not a physician. I'm going to leave that up to Dr. Karfeld and his expertise and his colleagues in that regard. But from a legislative perspective, I think there are some things that can be done that could equal that or level that playing field a little bit and perhaps make some things better. I think a lot of time the prescriber will often prescribe something that they know is covered by the insurance company or the insurance plan of their patients. And right now that tends to be more opioid-centric as opposed to alternative measures. And so one of the things that could be done legislatively, and I think there's a growing support for, is to allow that insurance coverage to cover other types of alternative pain management. And by doing that, then that opens up the encouragement or the incentive to try other things. And so with Medicaid and Medicare, it's the same thing. I mean, I think that's the beginning of what Trump was talking about when it is press release is encouraging some of those Medicaid, Medicare dollars that you and I pay into the federal government to be used for other types of pain management than just traditional opioid use in this case.
Doc, we have this problem with chronic pain. It's one of the most severe problems we have in this country right now. What's the alternative to opioids? And I'm hoping you're going to come up with the right answer.
Well, what is important, what you look at from my point of view, which I think the alternative, integrative, or integrative, or holistic model, whichever word you want to use, is that you want to look at the cost of the pain. You're more in going under the hood of the car rather than try to put a little duct tape over the red flashing light on the dashboard. And so with pain, as a naturopathic doctor, you look upon it as a neuroinflammation. I mean, pain is just a signal telling you that something is wrong. So you want to see what is causing that signal. Is it a physiological driver, or it may be a emotional driver? But what we know is that there are a lot of nutritive factors that can help to downregulate these neuroinflammatory signals. You have good fats, you have phospholipids, you have different amino acids that can help to regulate it. You can also look and see, are they doing something that is inflammatory in nature? And then we go back to diet. is this individual eating something that is then promoting inflammation in the body? We have, the medical profession has this notion that there's really not much correlation between what people eat and the symptoms that they exhibit. But that is completely untrue, because we're all made up of building blocks of nutrition. So everything we put into our mouth, our lifestyle, chemicals and toxins we're exposed to, they're going to have an impact. And it is important then to start to recognize that and then address that in order for, in the long term, be able to then both prevent the pain from coming and then also then look at the actual cause of the pain.
So you're of the opinion that integrative medicine's movement into this chronic pain management situation would probably be a better answer than the opioids. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That is the only way that you can actually fix the crisis, is by striking at the cause of it. Instead of, the pharmaceutical medications are good in fighting.
You're breaking up a little, Doc.
Pharmaceutical medications, they are just with the crisis to manage something, but then when we're dealing with something chronic, need to then look deeper and deal with it on a more physiological level. And that's where you can't just keep managing symptoms by doing a Band-Aid therapy, which then these drugs then are known to cause effects that will initiate other issues later on in life, where you then have to add more medication to manage those adverse reactions from the initial drug.
So, Russ, where do you stand when you see an opportunity like this where we can bring in a different format for treating people for these chronic pain conditions? How do you see government's role in engineering that or working towards that from the perspective of the insurance companies and the people who pay for the services?
Right now, our legal system favors one method of pain relief, if you will, one type of treatment, and it's basically a pharmaceutical type of treatment. And that's just the way the legal system is set up. Now, how it got there, does it have to do with a lot of lobby money and that kind of thing? Maybe so. I really don't know, but that's where it is right now. And I think that the law needs to empower the experts. When I say the experts, that means that means the traditional medical doctor, that means the naturopath, that means the various different types of solutions that we have out there, and it just doesn't right now. So I think by making some legal changes and opening up the insurance coverage to cover more than just one particular type of care, that will go a long, long way. And the other thing I would just add to that, Bob, is to encourage some education in this whole thing. I'll use myself as an example. About, several years ago, I had a rotator cuff surgery. I had a torn rotator cuff in the shoulder. My physician at the time, for pain relief, gave me a prescription for OxyContin. There were 3 pills in that bottle. And when I mentioned that, he said, "Look, these things are incredibly addictive, okay? And if you need it, then there's something there. But I don't want to do more than 3 of these things because they can have really negative blowback." I think he's probably the exception more than the rule in the traditional surgical realm. But that was my education right there. He knew these had the potential to be very, very addictive. And I think that if more physicians recognize that and prescribed accordingly, then we wouldn't have this problem. So open it up to alternative type of coverage for your health care, and encourage our the medical community to shoot straight with their patients.
Well, that would mean that we would have to open up Medicare and Medicaid to the integrated process. That's a pretty big move, but I've been working with several legislators talking about bringing integrative medicine into the mainstream. And would you be surprised to hear that 37 of our state's attorney generals agree with me, except for our own here in Idaho. He didn't sign this. They're signatories to a letter asking insurers to allow integrative medicine for chronic pain to be covered in their health policies. So do you see this as a boon to the integrative practices, Dr. Carfeld, and do you think this is something that's going to encourage more people to be involved in the process of integrative medicine to help people?
Yes, I'm very encouraged with that. I've seen a great trend during the 30 years that I've been in clinical practice. People are looking more towards integrative solutions. And I think the best is if you can combine the different professions so you can use all their strengths to support a patient. If they need medical support, that they get that. If they need naturopathic, chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, whatever it is that they need, that is what is applied to them. The challenge, I think, is going to be how the insurance companies are going to guide this and limit this. Just like you have with a medical doctor, they have standard of care, that this is how they're supposed to operate and function, and if they don't, then they won't get the proper coverage from the insurance companies. So then the insurance companies are starting to guide the patient's care depending on what they pay out and what they don't pay out. So I believe that is going to be the challenge for integrative, holistic doctors, is that the type of care that they're able to give is not always what they would feel would be the best for the patient. So, that's my big concern, but I'm very excited about that. It's hopefully moving more in that direction.
We're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share, with your host Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Senator Russ Fulcher and Dr. Michael Carfeld. We're sponsored by Altrua Health Share, and our topic for this evening is opioids and the crisis thereof. Let's get back one more time to the insurance situation, because you really got three kinds of coverage. You've got the private coverage, you've got Medicaid, and you have Medicare. Is it going to be a legislative situation to force the insurers to cover this by pushing it through the Medicare and Medicaid policies from the government? Or do you think they're going to be able to acquiesce themselves and understand that they have to change? Russ?
Medicare and Medicaid is a function of federal dollars, federally appropriated dollars. And so the only way that's going to get reappropriated, or the rules are going to change, is through some kind of legal action or rule. And so, yes, I think it is going to require that. However, I might also point out that there's other mechanisms, charity care, and for example, and some of the more family-based, faith-based alternatives out there in terms of caring for one another. So when it comes to Medicare, Medicaid, any kind of tax redistribution, it's going to take a legal response. But we still have some ability in the private sector to encourage some of those other alternatives. And for that matter, if we could get some legal changes to recognize some of those private alternatives, and that would be good as well. But either way, I think that the government, good, better, and different, is going to play a big role in getting things changed. It's just the way things work right now.
You know, we have one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, yet ranked number 37 in world care. I've done some extensive research on the integrative medicine part of this equation, and in almost every case, the cost for integrative is a lot less because it's less invasive than the general allopathic routes of care. So why is the medical profession so obstinate in bringing integrative care into the forefront? Is it because they consider it competition and they might make less money? What is the real key here? Is it a dichotomy because that's what they learned in medical school and can't change or don't want to change? Dr. Karlfeldt, could you start that off, please?
Well, I think it's important to understand where the education is coming from. A lot of these universities are funded by pharmaceutical dollars, which means that obviously their type of products or the information that would support the selling of their product needs to be part of the curriculum. And for the pharmaceutical companies, the money is in managing symptoms. Now, they really don't have that strong of a desire to find a solution of whether it's pain or psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, etc., or even cancer for that reason. But the moment they find the solution, they can't manage it any longer. So, I mean, if they truly did want to find the solution, they would. It's just there's just no money in a health individual, from a pharmaceutical company's point of view. So then you have kind of as a next step is that there's no pharmaceutical drug that then comes without any kind of adverse impact, which leads to that there's another set of symptoms where you need to manage, which then gives you the opportunity to then lead that patient into the next level of drugs, which cause another set of symptoms and so forth. So, from the farm, I think it is just money. From the kind of the way the system is set up currently, and I think a lot of good intentional medical doctors are caught in that system, and because of that, they're just not aware of the impact of integrative care.
How do you think if they enacted a law that would allow you to deal with patients on an integrative basis for chronic pain, how do you think that would affect you if you had to respond and take Medicaid or Medicare payments? Would that help or would that hurt your practice?
Well, I think the benefit would be that there would be a kind of a federal recognition, which would force the medical profession then to accept the integrative model. And the challenge is that if with Medicare and Medicaid, if that system bleeds over into the integrative care practitioner, they will be dealing with the same kind of issues that medical doctors are dealing with, is that they have to shorten their visits in order to be able to make money. So then that becomes an issue then of the quality of care that you're able then to give to your patient.
Well, I have to tell you, I've done enough studies on integrative care to understand that in most cases, being less invasive, it is also less costly. And all of the surveys that I've looked at on the different problems that we have, more severe problems like obesity and diabetes and heart problems or cancer, they're all better treated by the integrative process, and the cost is between 20 to 40% lower. Would you tend to agree with me there, Doc?
Yeah. I mean, from a federal point of view, to allocate money, the integrative model is much cheaper, and the dollars would go much further. Obviously, for the pharmaceutical companies, it costs them money if they don't sell their product. So I think if the mindset of the nation accepts integrative care, I think the quality of our health care will increase and the satisfaction of the patients will increase dramatically. And I think the financial crisis we're dealing with will pretty much be solved if we include good quality integrative health care.
Bob, if I could just interject right quick. Remember, I look at this world a little bit differently. I look at it through a legislative lens because that's my background, and I saw how and I see how the basic interests operate with government. And this is just an observation. In many cases, I think the culture between the medical community and the naturopathic community has simply turned into a kind of a non-compatible culture. And I think it goes back to what Dr. Kaufeld was talking about just a minute ago with our education system. If you go through traditional medical school for X number of years, you're taught that this is the answer, this is the pathway, and you become defensive of what you learn. And I suppose conversely, it's the other way around too. If you go through the naturopathic channels, and that is the focus, and that's the solution, and that's where your energy and your focus goes. The education system needs to be more balanced. There needs to be, and I suppose that probably goes back to the dollars, right? Where those dollars are funded, but it needs to be more balanced because there really is good alternatives out there, but our physicians through one channel or another don't seem to be getting a well-rounded education all the way around, and that's just an observation. I'm not an expert on that. I just see it from sitting on the Senate Education Committee for 10 years, perhaps, but that could be part of the issue.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you're on the right track. Many of our European allies have been using integrative care for many years, and a lot of the doctors have licensed themselves both as MDs and NDs, and are having great success in being able to cherry-pick the best of both worlds in science-based medicine to help people. Why is it that in the land of the free and the home of the brave, we don't have any choice in the type of medical care we want to participate in because the insurance companies regulate it and don't want to cover certain procedures? Don't we deserve to choose for ourselves, Russ?
Yeah, of course. And I frankly, if there's a silver lining in this opioid crisis, Bob and Dr. Karlfeldt, I would argue that it has brought to the forefront a real negative situation and potentially even galvanized a lot of the interests on both sides of this equation into recognizing there's a problem that it has to be dealt with. Why are we so skewed on one side? It has to do with capitalism. It has to do with the tremendous amount of revenue that comes with selling a product. In this case, pharmaceuticals. So I'm sure that that's a big part of this whole thing. But also, we're smart enough to realize that God gave us a brain, and that means that we have other ways of dealing with these problems. And to use Dr. Karlfeldt's example of understanding why the red light on the dashboard is coming on, not just the fact that there's a red light and we cover it up. So maybe that's a long-winded answer, but bottom line is that yes, we should have more than one particular choice, and actually I think we're going to get it.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Healthy Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share with your host, Bob Neugebauer, on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions. On 580 KIDO, we're speaking with Senator Russ Fulcher and Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and we're sponsored by Altrua Health Share. Our topic tonight is the opioid crisis. So, Dr. Karlfeldt, I believe that this opioid crisis is going to change the face of how health care is delivered in this country, and I've said so openly in several articles on this show. As Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. How do you both feel about the drug companies with their overpricing and systematic TV and magazine advertising to get their drugs to market and sold to the consumer? Do you think we should curtail their advertising ability legislatively, just as we did with the cigarette companies? Dr. Karlfeldt, could you go first?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. What these advertisements, commercials do, they put the medical doctor in a very difficult position where the patient almost guides their own care based on the commercial that they've seen. So, if the doctor does not give the patient the drug that they're looking for, the patient will just go then elsewhere. So it is important to understand that these pharmaceutical companies with these commercials, they're just businesses. They're there to make money. And for example, my wife, she's involved in an organization called Health Freedom Idaho. And, the vaccination industry in the 1980s, with no childhood epidemic to speak of, the market for vaccination, it was worth $170 million. So not that much. The market for vaccines since then has grown 350 times larger. In the 60s, the U.S. vaccine schedule in the United States called for just 5 vaccines, and now 72, 15-fold increase. And since 86, the pharmaceutical companies have pushed up the average cost fully vaccinated child with private insurance of the age 18 from 100 and now it's 2,100, almost 2,200. And these are the same companies that fueled the opioid crisis until now. We finally said the nation, as a nation, we said enough is enough. So these companies, they're there to make money, and I don't think that we should give them these powerful outlets that we have through media. We should let doctors be the one that knows what medication that should be appropriate for that patient. We shouldn't let the patient guide their care based upon what they saw on Google or TV.
Senator Fulcher, would you be willing to legislate against the drug companies for advertising?
This is a tough one for me, to be honest. I'm a free market guy, and I look at this thing through the lens of commerce and the free market. By the same token, I think the encouragement should be on disclosure. To Dr. Carlfeld's point, is so much of the time when we see those advertisements, it's strictly for the promotion of that one single business, and I get that. That's called capitalism, and that's what those businesses are there to do, is promote their product or their solution. And so I think the short answer would have to be, we need to encourage information. We need to encourage the fact that if there is a flip side to the argument, then that has to be disclosed in the process. And I know that we did that as an interim step with the whole tobacco lobby, and
right,
with the disclosures on that. And I guess that would be my first step would be to go heavy on the disclosures. I'm reluctant, just as a free market guy, to just say, I just want to ban it from the government standpoint. But there certainly needs to be showing the flip side of the argument, or the stats and the actual facts when it comes to the use of a particular product.
I believe in 3 to 5 years we're going to see integrative medicine and mainstream medicine merge, and it's moving in that direction. Just recently, the University of California, Irvine received a $200 million gift to start an integrative health and medical facility, and I believe that even down here in St. Al's, they are currently working on an integrative clinic. Don't you both think it's about time for our allopathic medical community to own up to the fact that they are only part of the solution, and that integrative medicine would be the ultimate solution? Lower cost, better care, better wellness among the people in America, and choice of where they want to get taken care of.
I'll go ahead and start that off, Bob, and I'm just going to emphatically say yes. And optimistically, I think it's going to happen, and it's going to happen because it works. It's going to happen because it's lower cost. It's going to happen because we have got to find solutions that reduces the burden on our families. And so when you find something that works, that costs less money, it only makes sense to try to proliferate that. And so whatever initiated that grant at California Irvine probably was exactly that. It's cost and effectiveness. And I saw my health insurance bill mandated by the federal government last month. And so as a consumer, I want to see that go down. And by expanding those choices, that's an excellent way to do it. And I think that's a big solution, or a big part of the solution, to the healthcare costs that we all struggle with every month. And so the answer to that is yes.
Dr. Carlfeld?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Fulcher, or I'm sorry, Senator Fulcher's comments. Yeah, I think that the biggest power is that when we come together and we use our strengths together for the best care of the patient. And I can't see that there would be any better solution to healthcare here in the United States than to do that. And what people a lot of times think that holistic medicine, integrative medicine, that there's no science behind it, and it's not science-driven, and which is further from the truth. There's a huge amount of science in utilizing nutritional components like vitamin C, like phospholipids, like the different minerals, like different amino acids, different herbs that are not habit-forming, but can then be a good alternative to some of these pharmaceutical agents that can then put a person in a worse situation long-term than what they were in during a crisis.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. We really appreciate your insights, and we'll have to see what happens in the future here. But maybe we'll have you back in another 6 months or so and see how far we've come along on this. You're listening to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Thank you and good night.